Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Well, we want to do another outdoor video today, and the reason is I was asked a wonderful question that I think is really worth answering in a wonderful setting like this. So the question is, how do you run computers in an off-grid scenario? I mean, maybe you live in California and are expecting brownouts and blackouts sometime soon. Maybe you're just part of the people going, everyone's trying to push everyone on electric cars, and electric cars are damaging the grid because our grid cannot handle our air conditioners at the peak of summer, let alone everybody basically plugging in a whole second house just to get around. Of course, California, the day that they announced that they're going to ban the sale of gasoline engines, later on that day said, please don't charge your electric car between these hours and these hours. Of course, if you don't have a high power voltage adapter on your house, it's going to take you up to 4 days to charge your Tesla. You get a high power one, you can do it a little bit faster. Of course, that draws a ton of power, which electricity is going to start costing more money, especially if we're trying to go into the alleged green scenarios. There's a lot of issues with all of this, but it turns into the matter is, do you want your computers going on in the middle of a brownout? There obviously is a wonderful argument to say, maybe we should just take the time off and rely a little bit less on computers. But this is Switch to Linux. We are technically a computer and technology channel, so we have to talk about the fact that we might need to play our video games. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, guys, I went up to Voyageurs National Park. I was waiting for the northern lights to come out because there was a good chance of it, and I ran out of other things to do. It was a Saturday afternoon, so I literally took my Raspberry Pi, my portable battery, my chair, and my table, and I went out off in the middle of effectively nowhere and played video games for a few hours until nightfall came so I could watch the northern lights over a lake. But how do you run your computers in an off-grid scenario? That's what we want to answer today, and there's a lot of different components that we need to talk about. So the first one is your power input. The second, we're going to talk about power storage. The third is power type. The fourth is, let's talk about internet a little bit in an off-grid scenario. And the fifth is computers. Of course, I can come to you with all these with experience. I have been running this channel for over a year. I think it's been about a year and a half now, living out of that van off-grid. I'm still streaming regularly. I'm still uploading videos regularly. I still run my computers regularly. And frankly, my lifestyle hasn't changed other than the fact that I get a chance to hang out and travel in wonderful places like this. I mean, there's a river right this way. I'm in this little forest here. I'm a little concerned with the amount of trees we have with the solar, but so far we seem to be pulling in enough power that I can run my day. But I want to talk about these principles. So let's get into these. Number one, power input. How are you going to feed the electricity into your system? I should probably talk about power storage first because with power storage, this is kind of where you are setting your energy aside. If you're relying exclusively on solar the way houses do, you'll only be able to run your computers if the clouds aren't covering the solar panels. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and talk about power input first. How are you going to power your life? Obviously, we have a grid, and in many people that are listening to this video, you're not going to be traveling around the country in a van. You might just be building a little tech shack or something, an annex under your house. Maybe you're just rewiring portions of your office to have an off-grid power supply. All these are doable, and I actually did these to test what I could do before I moved into this van. I was doing some elements of my life in an off-grid scenario, powering it with solar panels. But grid tying. Now, if you're doing a grid tie scenario, realize this, most houses that have solar panels do not actually have a battery backup system. They simply feed power back into the electric grid. If the electric grid is down, they can power a little bit of things off of their solar panels. But again, if clouds come over, stuff just stops working. We don't want that to be the case. But your power input, you're going to have grid. You're going to have solar as an option, which is not green as much as it is simply good off-grid power. It's not super amazing. I have 500 watts of solar on top of my van. That does pretty much, that's going to cover me most of the times in the summer unless we get a cloudy week. In the wintertime, it's not enough. just because the angle of the sun, people said, well, you know, put angles in it. It doesn't matter. It does not matter in the winter. If you angle your solar panels towards the sun, you're still losing too much time in the day. And this brings us to generators or DC-DC chargers. In my case in the van, I have a DC-DC charger. So when I hit multi-cloudy days, I'm running low in power. I just move the 2 hours to my next destination, turn on my DC-DC charger, and my battery bank charges. The other factor we have is generators. I actually can power my van off of a generator. I have shore power, which allows me to plug into any standard 110 AC outlet, and my converter that draws the power is 750 watts, which is less by half as the average small generator, be it gasoline, diesel, or propane. But you can have power inputs, and what I would do if I were building a shack that's not a van but just a shack, I'd have a good solar battery bank. I would have solar panels because they're good passive. You probably want some grid tie, and you want a generator as a backup. These are the factors that you're going to want to have for your power input. And as long as you have means to draw power into your life, then you're going to be doing good. Now, the second is power storage, because if you're relying exclusively on the grid, or if you're relying exclusively on solar panels, you'll only be able to use your devices when you have enough power coming in to use your devices. If you have a storage bank, however, you can use your devices consistently. I have 200 amps of lithium in my van. 200 amps of lithium is certainly enough for a single person to do some fairly complicated and power-intensive things, and a lot of things that are not quite as power-intensive. Now, how do you do this? If you're doing the house system, you have the Powerwall. It's either made by Tesla or Renogy. It's one of the Elon Musk companies, but you can look up the Powerwall. That's one option that doesn't take a lot of space because it's basically just a wall of batteries. You can also just get your basic lithium batteries, put them in the corner. There are larger battery banks that you can get, which are really designed for office and house off-grid scenarios. Have a look at the Will Prowse has an awesome channel. He is an entirely self-taught, but probably the best guy in solar and in batteries. Awesome guy out there in Las Vegas. We who live off-grid and do off-grid things, we all know who he is, and his channel is an absolute gem to the off-grid world. But with that, the other things you want to do is, like I would get, if I were doing a house scenario, I'd get one of the bigger Blue Eddies. A Blue Eddy is an amazing device. It's a single contained unit. It has power inverters, it has DC outlets, USB ports, wireless cell phone charging, all sorts of stuff. It all has it built right in. They're a little bit pricier, but it's a very good, easy, all-in-one scenario with very little work that you would have to do. I'm, of course, not that much of a guy. I'm a do-it-yourself guy. I even built my own batteries custom. I built all the components in my van. I threw the solar panels on. I manually ran the wires everywhere. I like doing that type of thing, but that's kind of up to you. The Blue Eddies will take away the need to do that, or your large battery banks are going to take away the need for at least having the batteries. Whatever you're using for power storage, just make sure you're using lithium, and you want the LiFePO technology, lithium ion phosphate, which is different from some of the lithium ion batteries you'll get in cell phones and things like that. The problem is Jackery are the most popular by brand recognition portable battery supplies. They use the lithium technology that's a lighter, it's lighter, easier to carry, but it only has 500 life cycles to it. Whereas your LiFePO has 5,000 life cycles. So it's worth paying the extra for getting that technology. That's what I put in my van. I just bought 8 individual LiFePO lithium cells, and I wired them together, a series in parallel, to get a single 200 amp lithium ion battery. You could do, if cost is a thing, you could spend a lot of money on lead acid batteries, but they have a lot lower lifespan, they're a lot heavier, they're a lot harder to deal with, they require a lot more maintenance and things like that. So whatever you're doing for power storage, just use lithium. This is going to bring us to our next tip, the power type. Now, I have in my van, I have only one computer that's a regular use computer that is AC, and that does not even have to be. One of my Patreon followers sent me a link to a company that actually sells DC powered power supplies for ATX boards. So if I really wanted to, I could actually pull out my current AC power supply and swap it with a DC power supply and run my large streaming computer exclusively on DC. The reason I'm not doing that is because those power supplies are fairly pricey. At this time, it's not worth the investment. However, if my power supply goes bad, or I'm building a new computer, or I have a lot of extra cash laying around, I will probably do that because it's going to be a little bit more power efficient. For this reason, when you're using AC power, of course, alternating current versus direct current, every form of energy storage is going to be direct current. So running things off of DC is always going to be more efficient in your off-grid scenario than running things on AC. That being said, you can get inverters. Inverters, there's two types. There's modified sine and pure sine. If you're running a big streaming computer like a standard ATX computer board with a power supply, you have to have a pure sine wave inverter. If you're just charging a laptop, or you're running one of the micro towers with a standard AC to DC converter plug, you can run a modified sine wave. What does this mean? Well, the pure sine wave, if you understand how sine waves work, they're these smooth cycles in power. And that's what AC current is. It's a smooth AC cycle. Well, modified, they're cheaper, significantly cheaper, half the cost. They do a block wave up and down because it's cheaper. It gets a little bit of a sine function, but it's in steps instead of being pure. What I'm running is I'm running a pure sine wave inverter because I want to be able to run everything. My laser printer that I have in the van, that requires AC power. The power supply requires AC power. If you have your standard kitchen utensils, blenders, mixers, things like that, those also require a pure sine wave inverter. So you need to make sure you have your pure sine wave. Now, the disadvantage of running AC is that you are going to lose some power in the conversion. Merely turning on and keeping on your inverter burns 5 to 10% of your power. You could actually plug it in and measure it. I never have. I don't turn on my inverter unless I'm explicitly needing it. I rarely forget to turn it off because there's a big colored panel on my electrical panel that it's very easy for me to see. All right, but that being said, you can create the AC power you need with an inverter. It does use extra power, and the advantage of having it is any extra gadgets with a standard power supply, as long as it fits within the wattage ratio of your AC inverter, you're going to be able to run it just fine. I run an induction oven in my van when I'm mostly in the summer when I'm at full power, or if I'm at full power and I know it's going to be a sunny day, full power in the morning, I'll cook my food on electric because it saves me power for propane and things like that. So with that though, that is your AC. However, if you can build your entire system, including your computers, to run off of DC, you're going to get more bang for your buck because you're not losing a lot of power in the conversions. All right. So many computers are actually DC powered. All of your laptops are actually DC powered. Sure, they have the AC adapter that plugs in. All that thing is, it's an AC adapter that converts the power to DC, usually at 19 volts, and feeds it into the laptop. Your micro towers, your mini towers, those are all generally DC these days. I have one small tower. It's a mini tower that is still AC. I don't know why. Your single board computers, your Raspberry Pis, these are also DC, although those usually you can run off of a USB power supply. So you can get a 12 volt USB power supply. Inside of it, it's going to convert the 12 volt from your basic battery bank into the 5 volt that SBCs, Raspberry Pis, phone chargers, and things like that need. And you can just have random USB ports laying around that, as long as nothing's plugged in, they're not drawing any power. If you can convert your computers to DC power, then that's going to be a better bet. You're usually going to do that utilizing some form of converter. So I use what are called buck converters. They bring my 12-volt battery banks, they increase the power to 19 volts. Do I lose some power in that conversion? I do, but I'm going to use less power than the AC conversion and then plug in the AC adapter back down to DC. That's a waste of 2 steps of energy efficiency. So using the buck converters, what you do is you plug these guys directly in. It's going to take a 12-volt in from your basic battery bank, and then it's going to output the power that the computer needs, which is generally 19 volt. You can buy those buck converters. They're about 20 bucks on Amazon. I'll have a link to some down in the description. With these, I actually run my mini towers. I built a laptop charger into the van so I can power a laptop using that method as well. And I also power this camera. I'm using battery right now, but when I'm doing my live streams and using my DSLR camera attached through the capture card into my computer for high quality video on my videos, I actually plug the camera, also gets plugged into my battery bank utilizing another one of those converters that takes the 12 volt, drops it to 8 volt, which is what the camera is looking for. So all of these things are going to be your ideas for what type of power. DC if you can, AC if you have to, and it is indeed worth using, worth having the AC inverter even if you don't need it, because there might come a time you need to plug some device in. Now, before we actually get to the computers, we're going to talk about internet. Obviously, I get internet around. Starlink's coming out. They have Starlink for RVs now, and a lot of people ask, oh, are you going to get Starlink? Not right now, no. I've actually know several people with Starlink. One of the van life channels I watch, he got Starlink. He got rid of his mobile internet, like his cellular plan. He's got pretty much straight Starlink. Guess what? He's having power issues now. He's wanting to double his battery bank. I talked to some folks. I was down in Maine a couple months ago, and I talked to some folks that were actually using Starlink, and they said it sucks. It draws too much power. They can only use it if the sun is out because they have to plug in their solar panels to keep the battery up to charge. They don't have as much power efficiency as I have. For a power ratio, it uses the same amount of power as a gaming PC does. Way too much power in an off-grid situation. Now, if you're in a case where you're living at home and you have grid and you're just relying on your battery banks in a grid down situation, I think it's going to work for you. It has the advantage of having really good up, really good down, more places than you can get cellular. However, the downsides, it requires way too much power right now, and when they solve that power issue, I will add Starlink to my list, but I'll probably also keep my cellular systems. The second big problem with it is it does need a clear view of the sky. There's a lot of trees around here. I probably could get Starlink to work here, but I might have to play around with it a little bit. It also has the inconvenience of having to have a big dish. Right now in my van, I can pull on into some shopping plaza parking lot, crank on my internet, sit in the back, and nobody even knows I'm in there. If I had to throw a giant Starlink satellite dish out on the front lawn or on the top of the van or something like that, it's pretty obvious. And if I need to get out of there in a big hurry, I got to get that internet thing down. Starlink is too inconvenient at this time. Now, next year when they come out with their technology that they're doing a deal with T-Mobile to interface with cell phones, it might be a game changer. We'll have to look into that. At the time I'm recording this, Starlink is off the table. There's too many limitations with it, but it's something I am watching closely. And as soon as it makes sense, I will pick it up. What I'm using is cellular. The first thing that comes to your mind is hotspotting off of your phone or getting one of these little MiFi hotspots. That will do in a pinch if you do not require your computer for a ton of stuff. For me, that ain't gonna work. Okay, I have an IoT modem. There's several of these. The brands you're gonna look for: Airlink, Peplink, and Nighthawk. And there's a couple other ones out there as well that I forgot the name of off the top. These, you can just get a basic SIM card with any cell plan. Some of them will work with your prepaid plans, some of them will not. Mine, unfortunately, will not work with prepaid plans. I have to use a contract line, which costs me more money, so I might investigate changing or at least having an alternative. You simply plug your SIM card in, you have a wireless hotspot. I have 150 gigabytes of internet per month to use. It costs me right around $100. And again, if you can figure out a way to get your internet on a prepaid plan, you're going to cut that bill in half. But I use an IoT modem, and on the top of my van, I have a cellular antenna, which doesn't do a ton of boosting. It'll do a small amount of boosting. It does allow me to get internet a lot of places. And I just consult FCC maps online to see exactly where I can get internet well. And those are the places I move. This spot here, I am in the mountains in Montana. I am at a free campsite. I can stay here for 14 days. It costs me nothing. There's a river right there. If I need to take a shower or wash clothes, I can use that river water to do it. I can build a fire right here. I can chill right here for 14 days, pay not a cent. And I consulted FCC maps. I'm getting 6 down, 6 up. Not perfect, but it absolutely is going to do everything I need to do for most of this week. That's what you can do. And that is an awesome situation. Now, if you're not using an IoT modem, you can use your hotspots, you can use your cell phone connectors. Things like that will work in a pinch. They're not perfectly ideal, but they do a decent job. All right, finally, number 5, let's get into computers. Luke Smith last week did a video the other day talking about he's going to cut his computers down. He wants another 1 computer. Luke Smith, take my advice, get 2. 2 computers. One is going to be your, this thing can do everything I need to do. The second computer is in the event you have a grid down situation, the nuclear cloud is preventing the solar, you've run out of gas and you have very little power, you still want to be able to get on and do some basic communications, assuming the cell towers haven't been nuked as well. But I find it takes a lot to knock out the cell towers. Get 2 computers at least. I have a number of computers for different things. Here's why. My big streaming computer, I do not want to turn that on and use it for basic email, internet searches, things like that. It draws too much power in a grid down situation. If I'm relying on that battery bank, that computer, my big streaming computer, will drain my batteries from full to unusable in about 8 hours of time. That gives me less than 1 day. But in a scenario where I do not need that big and that powerful of a computer, you can use a small one. My media PC, which is a micro tower, it is a Dell, I forget what model, it's a Dell with a i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM. It works beautifully. It runs Endeavor OS. That's my basic multi-purpose computer. I can run that full, from full battery, no power coming into my system, 3 days. 3 full days. That's why you want at least 2 computers, 1 high power, 1 low power. I can run my my Raspberry Pi computer, which can do basic communication as well, about 2 weeks. Okay, that thing draws no power at all. And so having at least 2 computers, 1 is high power for your serious work, and 1 is for low power basics, internet research, maybe some small games, things like that. These are the types of things you want to do. Of course, SBCs, they use USB ports, basic power plugs. You know, you can use cell phone chargers for those as well. Those are the types of things you can do. But all of this is leading up. If you need to go off grid, you want to have a way, or if you're living in a place where you have constant downtimes, what is the overall power cost in this? My van, overall, my whole power system involved is only about $2,000. Most of that was the battery, and batteries have significantly dropped in price since then. I could probably do it now for $1,500, even though prices and everything else are going up. That's solar panels. Let's do a quick rundown on my costs. My solar panels, you're going to plan on spending approximately $100 per 100 watt panel. It's going to be, and it will drop the higher wattage you put in per panel. It will drop a little bit. I have 2 200 watt panels on my roof. Those cost, I think they were $190 a piece. I have a 100 watt panel. That was about $100. I have $300 in a solar charge controller. No, it's $200 in a solar charge controller. I have $200 in my pure sine wave inverter. Let's just say a random $100 in miscellaneous wires and connectors, and $1,400 in my battery, which includes 4 battery cells, all the booster bars to connect them together, and that includes my battery management system. So these are all of the different various components. If you need a converter to power your battery off of your grid, which I would probably recommend if you're in a situation where you have grid power and you're just creating a backup, that's going to be, I think, $200 is what I spent on my converter, things like that. So the cost is not overly expensive. You can do it fairly well, and if you're in a situation where you really know you either want or need or want your computer, I mean, if you're in a grid down situation and computing is your life, you're going to want to invest a little bit of money into getting an off-grid situation set up. So a little longer of a video than I usually do, but hopefully this was very fun, very informative for you to figure out how to get your things running. Well, if you want to see all the various places that I travel around, have a look at my travel channel, which is Tux Traveler. I'll go ahead and link that down below and throw a card up here in YouTube so you can find that. You can find that channel over there. And with that, guys, I'm going to go play in the mountains in Montana. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.